The desert doesn't care how long you've walked. Doesn't care that your canteen's nearly dry. The wind carries whispers of old raids, and the cracked asphalt beneath your boots makes you stumble in exhaustion. You've been moving at night, keeping low, avoiding the drones and patrols, but they found your trail and are testing your endurance. You don't know how much longer you can hold out. A dog barked a few times behind you, far off, but following. You haven't heard it again, but you're sure it's still tracking you along with its owners. Ahead, beyond Sierra Blanca, lies your goal, the settlement of Arispe, a town of small homes so empty it might as well be a mirage. You remember planting fruit trees at a motel nearby in Sierra Blanca, saplings you'll need to take to Arispe, the last hope of a future for somebody. If you can find them moist, if you can make it past the checkpoint, if you can offer something of value, maybe you'll earn a moment's peace. Maybe you'll find someone who still remembers how to barter without bullets. You're thin, sunburned, and hunted, but you're not helpless. You've got your 22 and a stubborn will to survive. The question isn't what happens next. The question is, what do you do? Hello, fellow mutants. This is Copper Mutant, and today I'm sharing something a little different, but still very much in line with the world we've built together. I've created a playable text adventure game called Johnny Apocalypseed. It's a prequel to the Johnny Apocalypseed series you may have seen here before. It's set before that story begins. Some of you may have been waiting for more episodes, and while this isn't the next chapter, which I will get to in due time, it's a chance to walk in Johnny's boots, literally. Mostly, I'll admit this was for me, something I've long wanted to complete for a hobby. I'm sure you have hobbies of your own, and I'd love to hear what they are. I'm guessing for most of you it isn't playing around with old computers from the 1980s, but maybe something equally niche and interesting. Now, if you saw my previous video on using retro computers like the Commodore 64 for secure off-grid communication, you'll remember I talked about simulating old systems with an emulator, specifically Vice, the emulator I used to run C64 software on modern computers. On that topic, let me make a quick detour. There was a comment by a viewer with a name I'll avoid saying here about using a device called Meshtastic, which I looked into. It's a fascinating idea for post-apocalyptic communication across many miles, and if you use it on a Commodore 64, get an Ultimate 64, which was recently released if you want something new and reliable, then you could add some operational isolation, since an offline, old-school machine may leave fewer modern digital traces, no smartphone telemetry, no cloud backups, which could be an OPSEC plus if you manage your keys carefully. Using Meshtastic on a C64 could also lead casual observers of the traffic to ignore or misinterpret odd binary payloads from a weird host. In any case, back to my story. This game was built using a tool called Adventure Writer, a parser-based game engine from the early 1980s that I loaded into the Vice emulator, a virtual floppy disk into a virtual C64, if you will. It's not graphical. It doesn't have music. It's just words, but those words carry weight. You decide what happens. So what is a text adventure? I like to think of them as survivalist puzzles, resource management, limited options. You type commands like look, get water, or pass, and the game responds with descriptions, consequences, and choices. And some copper bullion, of course. There's no mouse, no menus, just your brain, your typing, and the logic of the world. In this game, you'll explore the desert of West Texas, interact with objects, and make decisions that affect your path. You won't be told what to do. You'll have to figure it out. And no, I won't be spoiling how to win. Working within the logic of a text adventure parser means thinking like the machine, simple, direct, and structured. Parsers like the one in Adventure Writer don't understand full sentences or conversational phrasing. Instead, they respond to two-word commands like get water, look room, or polish round. These commands are matched against a vocabulary table, and if the parser doesn't recognize the verb or noun, if I hadn't programmed it to understand that word, it will either default to a generic response or fail silently. You'll want to avoid long inputs like, I would like to give the jujube sapling to the man, or can I go east now? Those won't register. Instead, keep it tight and tactical. Think of it like issuing orders in the field, short, clear, and purposeful. The parser is literal, so spelling matters, and synonyms aren't guaranteed. If the game expects toss bullion, typing throw stuff won't work unless that's been explicitly programmed. Once you get used to the rhythm, it becomes intuitive, like learning the dialect of a forgotten machine. I don't want to pretend that I made something vast and detailed as any commercial games back in the day. It's more of an exercise in proving that I could make something at all. Great text adventures are much deeper. Infocom was famous for Zork, which some of you may know, for example, but there were several others and more that followed it, and even some that have made it to this day as so-called interactive fiction, which go much deeper and allow much more natural responses. But that was true even back in the 1980s. A good one that I recall is The Lurking Horror, also by Infocom. But my first computer game was Adventureland by Scott Adams, back on my VIC-20, and simple sometimes works too. Ultimately, I wanted to stick to making a very short game like this and tick it off my bucket list to prove that I could. I actually had a box copy of Adventure Writer for decades, and while I dabbled with it even as a teenager, I never committed to making a full game until now. It even pushed me to do the same with another graphical tool, Adventure Construction Set. More on that in another video. In fact, I've even taken to making a pen and paper tabletop game that utilizes copper bullion rounds as tokens, but that still needs some fleshing out as well. So, Adventure Writer let me build interactive fiction, text-based adventure games, without needing to learn how to code. It's based on an earlier British program called The Quill, which was designed to help writers create games using logic tables instead of programming languages. You didn't need to learn BASIC or assembly. You just needed to understand how to describe a world, define objects, and set conditions for how players interact with them. It was built for storytellers, not engineers. That's exactly how I built Johnny Apocalypseed, the prologue. I didn't write code, I wrote logic, pseudocode. I built the game with simple commands spread over several menus. If the player is carrying copper bullion and standing at a checkpoint, show this message. Or, if the raiders are still present, block movement east. It's like writing a survival manual in puzzle form. And yes, it took some trial and error. I worked through quirks like how to end the game properly, how to split commands east and pass, how to make sure that the parser didn't misinterpret offer as where. I consulted an old manual riddled with printing errors and an obscure PDF on how to choose between remove and destroy, figure out how to use done versus OK, and a message to close the game cleanly. I ran into bugs with this old program too, but I eventually got it working. It was a process, but it was also proof that you don't need to be a programmer to build a game end-to-end. You just need patience, curiosity, and a story you want to tell. Now, how do you actually play this? If you've got Vice installed from watching my quick tutorial in the last video, you're halfway there. I'll be sharing this game as a D64 disk image. That's the format used by Commodore 64 floppy disks. You load it into the emulator, boot it up, and you're greeted by the game's intro screen. From there, you type begin, and the adventure starts. You don't need a real C64 though. If you've got one with an SD2IEC module, that's great, but sure, you can run it on original hardware, and if you've got a C64 Mini or the Vice emulator, you can load it. There are many ways to enjoy it. In any case, this game is short, atmospheric, and designed to feel like a lost artifact from the early days of computing. And as such, it's not perfect. I know there's some bugs, but they aren't game-breaking, more like exploits. I'll be covering how I built it in a revised edition of A Commodore 64 Walkabout, a book I wrote some years back, with a chapter on Adventure Writer and how it can be used to create fiction, or survivalist fiction, in playable form. So, if you're curious, if you've got a keyboard and a little patience, give it a try. I'll be sharing the disk image soon, and pin the comment when I do. And if you've never played a text adventure before, this is a great place to start, because in the wasteland, words are weapons, and every decision matters. Well, that's all I had for today, fellow mutants. Until next time, this is Copper Mutant. Keep your bullion stacked, your saplings moist, and your parsers sharp. Signing out.